I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. With 8 weeks until Election Day, former President Trump and Vice President Harris met for the first time on the debate stage, and things got very interesting. So, will there be a round two? My guests today are here to break down the good, the bad, and the ugly. Co-founder of South and Hill Strategies, Colin Reed, and columnist for the Washington Examiner Salena Zito join me. And welcome back to Perino on Politics, where I call up my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And so, here we are, guys. Let me just turn it over to you first, Salena. Your takeaways from last night's debate.
Well, I started watching debates not in the debate room after the 2012 debate series with Obama and Mitt Romney. I just felt like I wasn't learning anything. And I now go to bars and just watch it with people in a very casual way and try to, get to know them beforehand, ask them where they are. And I found that the people that were at the bar thought that Harris, if you were going to say what is a win and what is a loss, Harris won because there was such a low expectation of what she was going to deliver. People didn't know enough in terms of style. But in terms of depth and understanding of what she stands for, she got really low marks from the people that were watching and trying to learn something about her and what her positions are. So while on style and performance, she did quite well, everyone in that bar agreed. But in terms of swaying a vote, changing a vote, earning a vote, that did not happen where I was.
Colin, I was telling someone earlier, I think it was Martha McCallum, that we've had several election-altering events, including an assassination attempt, a debate for Biden and Trump, where Biden basically then gets pushed out of the race, and Kamala Harris ascends to the throne of the Democratic Convention, at the Democratic Convention to be the nominee. And yet the race is still tied. And it might be after this debate, or maybe she gets a small bump. But isn't it interesting that people seem pretty locked in? And last night was an opportunity for both of them to sway some voters, at least where Salena was. It didn't sound like that happened. What about for you?
Well, it's been 11 weeks since the three of us convened in the same place after the first debate. We all remember how that went and the fallout from that. And, of course, it led to the deposing of the Democratic nominee and the ascension of Vice President Harris to the top of the heap. But an important thing happened in those 11 weeks, which is the polling numbers didn't really move that much. When Biden and Trump faced off prior to the first debate, Trump had about a 1.5-point lead. A couple weeks later, after Biden suffered the cataclysmic damage he did in that debate, the lead was about 3.5 points. So even after that, after that complete fiasco in which his own party realized within 35 seconds or so that this guy was not fit for the job he's trying to hold for another 4 years, let alone right now, the numbers barely move. So we're a deeply ensconced, divided country. Everyone's got their own point of view. We talk about these undecided voters, and we spend lots of time and money trying to go find them. I'm not sure there's too many of them out there. So Vice President Harris had high expectations going into this debate because she's an unknown commodity. People don't really know her. She didn't even make it to the starting gates the last time around. She didn't even, a single vote wasn't cast for her. In 2024, a single vote wasn't cast for her again. So if you're just a casual viewer tuning in on the Tuesday night after Labor Day, and you think, wait a minute, when I tuned out for the summer, Joe Biden was a nominee. Who is this person, and how did they become the presidential nominee? She has a lot more ground to gain, and she has a lot more. She has a lot more to do, a lot more work to do. People have their opinions made up of Donald Trump at this point, one way or another. Kamala Harris does not have that, and that's why this mattered so much for her, and why the stakes were so high.
Oh, there's so much good stuff to talk about here. So in the New York Times poll from last week that really shocked, I think, a lot of Democrats, or maybe they were expecting it, for Trump to retake the lead in the national polling by 1 point, but still, her trajectory had been going down, whereas after the convention, she was riding that sugar high. 88% of people in that poll, Salena, said they knew plenty about Donald Trump. They're done. They got it. But this is his third presidential election. This is his third presidential debate, or fourth, I guess, if you are counting that way. I want to talk about the debate moderators in just a moment, but I also want to talk about the audience, because there were about 60 million people that watched the debate. That's the preliminary numbers that we have. So that's a lot. That doesn't include how people followed it maybe on social media or on radio, et cetera. So this is a big audience, right? So Americans, as usual, tuned in after Labor Day, and now they're off to the races, so to speak. She really sat on her lead after the convention and went into hiding, basically. She did one interview with CNN, and I guess it was fine. Didn't really scratch the itch. I didn't think it was great, but it was fine. And then she holed up and she prepped for days, except for going to the spice shop that you wrote about. And maybe it paid off for her, right? Because she decided, this is the audience that I'm going to target. This is what I'm going to do. And many times I thought that President Trump was talking to an audience that he already has in his back pocket. So
I agree with you mostly. I think her debate prep was great. Being holed up in the most important state in the country and not sort of taking advantages, even if it's for a half hour or 10 minutes, whatever. You're in Western Pennsylvania. The entire country, the weight of the fate of the entire country rests here. And there was no opportunities taken. And, so yes, it paid off in terms of having a polished performance, because that's how the people that I was watching it said that was a performance. Mm-hmm. And they were irritated, because a couple of them were willing to think about voting for her, but they were very irritated that she didn't give them a reason. So I think that while on style and she may have earned some vote, maybe. But I think without doing some real engagement with voters, just let your hair down a little bit and get out there. She also lost opportunity. I don't think we've moved anywhere, to Colin's point. And I remember during the Democratic convention, I was actually traveling across the country, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Wisconsin, Michigan, all those states, trying to get a read of people. And while everyone was talking about a bounce, I made sure I go to the counties that count in these elections. Kern County in Michigan, Macomb County, Vernon County in Wisconsin, Kenosha. And she needed movement in those areas, and I wasn't finding it in places that she needed to have it. So I suspect, this is a really long way of me saying, I suspect that the same is going to happen after last night. I don't expect to see all that much movement. And I think we are stuck. And we've had enough cataclysmic or sort of unbelievable things to happen, and nothing has really moved it.
Yeah. Colin, what do you think about their strategy to have her not talk to the media, but to hole up in the hotel room and prep for what looks like, a $60 million TV audience, 60 million people TV audience?
Well, I think her strategy paid off. I am all for preparing for debates. I think preparation before leads to results on the stage. So I can't fault her for that. But to Salena's point about where she stands on the issues, and to take it back to Pennsylvania, since we're here with Salena right now, I mean, for instance, we have no earthly idea as to what happened over the last 5 years that Kamala Harris would say one thing as it relates to, say, the Green New Deal or her ban on fracking, or the support which she voiced very clearly 5 years ago, to where she is now. And it's not as though she was, an elementary school student who was learning more. She was a woman in her mid-50s. She was a sitting senator from the largest state in the country. She was a attorney general from California. And for her to take one position 5 years ago and have a completely different one now, especially in a state like Pennsylvania, where oil and gas jobs are such a big part of the economy. It's, I think, close to 500,000 million jobs, more than 122,000 in natural gas production alone. And then candidate Harris in 2020 was taking views that would have ended the oil and gas industry. Now she's saying she doesn't support that anymore, but we don't even really know why. And we haven't really been heard from her directly other than some pablum about her values being the same. And President Trump nor the moderators neither didn't really push her on that last night. And as a result, if that's the one and only time that we hear from her, voters are going to go and vote for her. Some are already voting already, given how early the votes are being cast this year, with just huge questions without answers. And that's a shame. And it's incumbent on her to explain it. But I think the strategy they've made is, let's just be there. Let's just be the vessel, the vehicle for anyone who doesn't like the other guy. And let's just hope that's enough to carry the day. There's only 7.5 weeks to go. It's been 7 weeks since she became the nominee on July 21st. So if you look at it that way, the hourglass is running out of time. And it's up to former President Trump to make that case, because we know the moderators aren't going to do it, nor should they. That's not their job. If you're in a presidential debate, it's your job to prosecute the case on your opponent. You can't rely on the moderators to ask the tough questions.
And especially for Republicans, right? I just talked to a friend who reminded me of the saying that Ginger Rogers did everything that Fred Astaire did, just backwards and in high heels. And that's how Republicans go into every debate or every interview. They're always going to be the underdog when it comes to them, or they're going to have, 3-on-1 or 2-on-1. Think of Candy Crowley in 2012. And the fact check she did on Romney that helped Obama out that turned out not to be true. Last night, there were a few opportunities where the moderators could have said, well, actually, Kamala Harris, that's not true. But they didn't do it against her. They did it against him several times, and maybe he deserved those in terms of, for example, the whole thing about the eating dogs situation. But Salena, what did you think of the moderators, or what are you picking up from people? What kind of criticism is ABC News getting from that?
So it was really interesting. One of the people that I was talking to last night was a Black gentleman, a C-suite level in his success in his life, mid-50s. And, he said, I've never voted for Donald Trump, don't particularly like him. However, as someone who has had to work twice as hard to get ahead, the moderators are really unfair, because I feel as though he's having to work twice as hard to get his point across. So he had empathy at that moment, right? And I said, does that change your vote? He goes, I don't know. I do know that it felt like it was stacked against him. And as a man who has tried to be successful in life, I have often felt that same situation. So I thought that was really, really interesting, and a different point of view that I had never considered.
Colin?
Yeah. I mean, look, the Republican voters and those who lean Republican, they're already inclined to not trust or believe that the mainstream media is a fair arbiter. And that you just kind of know that going into it. You have to do all the hard work on your own end. You know that if you have points to make, you're going to have to make them yourself. And that, to me, is the thing where Vice President Harris, the potential fatal flaw in her candidacy is that she is one half of an administration that people do not support, do not like, whose policies they believe have made their lives worse. And some Democrats want to act as though Vice President Harris has been a potted plant the last 3.5 years, just sitting in the corner, not responsible for anything, when at the beginning of this administration, they went out of their way to stress the historic nature of her vice presidency. It was always the Biden-Harris administration, and she was involved. She said the other day she was the last person in the room on the Afghanistan withdrawal that she supported. So these are the things that people need in their minds when they go to vote. Ultimately, people, when they vote in a few weeks, are they going to have all of the events of the last few days, of the last night in their head? Probably not. But they need to know if Vice President Harris, if they view her as an extension of the Biden administration, it's going to be a long night for the Democrats. If it's a referendum on Donald Trump and his personality or some of his other characteristics that he's amassed over the last few years, that's where the Democrats want this to be. And it's incumbent on the Trump campaign and all Republicans to lead that debate, because otherwise the media, left to their own devices, will let this become a discussion of anything but that.
I want to ask you a quick question on the second debate. So I thought it was after the debate, but Hemmer saw it before, that her team said they want a second debate. Fox News has offered to do a second debate, offered several dates for a debate. I don't know if it will happen. I just don't. And I'm curious if either of you think that there should be a second debate. Will there be a second debate? And do both candidates need and deserve it? But more importantly, do voters deserve another shot at listening to them to maybe get to more of the substance that you were talking about, Salena?
Yeah, I think they definitely should do a second debate. Historically, incumbent presidents tend to not do all that well when they go into their first debate. Donald Trump is not an incumbent president. However, he's a former president. And he sort of went right along with that historic trend. And so I think that the voters should probably be exposed to another back and forth between both of them. There was so little. This was the thing I heard so much last night. There's so little discussion about the two most important things that voters care about: inflation and the problems at the border. It was brushed aside, and I think voters were just craving to hear where these two candidates stand and how they would change the course of what's happening on both issues. So I think it would be great if they had another one.
Colin?
I would do it on ABC, though.
Yeah, look, voters deserve more than just one debate between the two people vying to be the leader of the free world. That's a disservice if that's the only one. And Selena's right. I mean, the new inflation numbers that came out today were 2.5%. They were far higher than the 1.4% inflation rate when Donald Trump left office. And that rate is kind of misleading because if you look at where inflation is now versus where it was when the administration changed hands, it's up closer to 20% overall. So these are the things that Vice President Harris needs to own. She needs to answer for. And she can't just be allowed to skate through as though she's this newcomer on the scene. I mean, President Trump's most effective line was when he was asking, when she's listing all of these great things she wants to do, why hasn't she done it already? And that's the question. Why hasn't she done it already? And or is this, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And those are the points where she has no good answers. But look, she had ready-made, canned answers on a lot of the other questions, and she was able to successfully bait him on some of these topics that he took hook, line, and sinker. And as a result, he didn't get to prosecute her the way he otherwise might have. And there's plenty to go after Vice President Harris on in her record, not only as vice president, but just as importantly, the views she took when she was trying to win a Democratic primary 5 years ago. That's all fair game.
And with that, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. And we are back with Perino on politics. This will be very quick. I just want to ask you, Salena, looking at where you live in Pennsylvania, this is where it's for all the marbles right there in Pennsylvania. Kamala Harris must win it. J.D. Vance apparently is going to spend a ton of time there. Trump will too, but he's going to be going to the other states as well. Where do you think the candidates go from here in the next 55 days, I think it is?
So Harris is in Johnstown, Pennsylvania on Friday. This marks her first visit to one of those, what I call the all-important, smaller, rural, post-industrial counties where you need to drive the numbers up. Until last year, it was a Democrat majority county, but it has been culturally conservative for probably 8 years. It did vote for Obama. She will be in Johnstown. It'll be really interesting to see if she continues with these tightly staged, very restricted events where only invited people attend, or if she's going to try to engage with voters. Voters want to, it's like when you cover a primary, they want to kick the tires. She's given them no ability to do that, and you need to do that in Cambria County. Trump will be here in my home county of Westmoreland County next week. J.D. Vance will be in Center County next week as well. I expect a lot of time spent by Trump and Vance in Erie. That is the most important county, not just in the state, but in the entire country. As go Erie County, so goes the rest of the country.
Colin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking back at the numbers in 2016, the first time that President Trump won, and he was the first Republican in a generation to do so, carry the state of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania in a presidential election, and it was like 44,000 votes. Salena can fact check me if I'm wrong. Out of about 6 million cast. And that just speaks to the incredible narrowness of the margin. And look, parties don't really agree on a whole lot right now. I think everyone, no matter where you stand or sit, agrees that the whole ballgame comes down to Pennsylvania. And it's hard to see a path for Vice President Harris without carrying Pennsylvania, because the other two states, the other Michigan and Wisconsin, likely will swing one way or another, whoever carries Pennsylvania. And certainly it's much easier for President Trump if he carries it. So this is an immensely close election. And Vice President Harris and her team seem really content to use a sports metaphor, since it's the NFL is back, it's the prevent defense. It's just sit back, let your opponent chip away. Don't worry if they pick up small yards here or there, as long as they don't get the big score. But that means you're really confident that you're ahead. And if all of these polls, look, the polling industry has taken it on the chin the last few years, and I get it. But if all of these polls are saying the same thing, which this is a margin of error race, don't forget that Trump voters don't tend to show up in these polls because they don't want to talk to pollsters, and they have no interest in speaking to someone who calls them. That doesn't mean they're not voting. They probably are voting, but they're not showing up in the polls. So if we get closer to this election and it's still as tight as a tick the way it is right now, President Trump is going to have a point or two that's just not going to show up in any poll. So Vice President Harris, if I'm her team, I want to build up a little bit of a lead before I just sit back and play defense and just commit no errors.
Yep, this race will not be won in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. It will be won in the other counties by about 500 extra voters in each county over what happened in 2020. Wow. Whoever achieves that is who will win. That's why you see Trump in Luzerne County and Cambria County and Erie County and Northampton County. And yet you see Harris. I don't quite understand their game plan. It befuddles me, because they're not making meaningful trips to areas where they need to pick off the parts of the New Deal coalition that Biden was able to pick off, and they're not trying to get them. And I'm just sort of stumped by it.
I'll finish this segment by just mentioning that all of the candidates did travel to New York today. Today is September 11th, on the 23rd anniversary of those horrible terrorist attacks. And, you could have a big debate last night, and America is one of the only countries in the world where you can then have everybody standing together in remembrance and paying tribute to the victims and the families of the 9/11 terror attacks. And that was a beautiful picture to see. We'll be right back. And we are back with Perina on Politics. Just a quick question for each of you, and I'm going to play in this one. I usually just ask, what am I missing? What are you going to pay attention to over the next few weeks? I'll go last. Colin, let's start with you.
Okay, so what I'm paying attention to that others may not be, I'm keeping an eye on foreign affairs, because the country right now, it's a legitimate question as to what President Biden is doing. I know he was there in New York today. That's great. He made some statement yesterday about how he was going to do 9/11. People have legitimate questions about who's in charge right now. And, the Houthi rebels are blowing planes out of the sky in the Middle East. It is not there's two wars going on. And Vice President Harris is not one who has ever been tested on the international stage to any degree that we know about, at least. So should international affairs, and let's hope they don't, but should something happen internationally or on the global stage, that's an advantage toward President Trump, because to paraphrase former President Clinton, voters will choose wrong and strong over weak and right any day of the week. And it does not. The world is far from a settled place right now. So let's hope it doesn't happen. But if we're looking at an October surprise, I might look abroad as opposed to at home.
And Salena.
I'm going to repeat myself. I am going to be spending all of my time focused on Erie, Luzerne, and Cambria counties. These are counties that never get any attention in any other time of the year, or any time ever, every 4 years. But these are the people and the lives that will make a difference on Election Day. So that's where I'll be spending my time. That's where my focus is.
Okay, here's what I'm going to talk about. Kamala Harris in the last several weeks has raised a ton of money, and the Democrats now have a cash advantage over the Republicans. And watch very closely what happens with Senate Republican races. The Republicans are likely to take the Senate because of just the way that the map works this year, but they really would like to have more than 50 votes. And there was an alarm raised yesterday by the National Republican Senatorial Committee saying, red alert, we need to be raising some more money or else we are going to be outspent. And, Trump can't do it all for these candidates. They're going to have to try to help win on their own as well. His coattails will help. But there is a real interesting thing happening on the Republican Senate side of things. So that's what I'm paying attention to. There you go. Yeah. Salena, I have one last question for you. If Colin and I were coming for dinner tonight in that beautiful kitchen of yours that we can see and our audience cannot, but they might have seen it before, with all of that equipment, what would you make for us for dinner tonight?
Okay, well, I'm in a fall mood, so we'd either have pumpkin pie or apple pie. I would make ricotta balls, which is something my immigrant Italian grandmother made that are really interesting. They're sort of fried in oil, water, and sauce, and they're basically ricotta, Parmesan, and eggs. I would make some homemade pasta and a marinara sauce.
I love it. Hey, did your granddaughter who played soccer the other day, is she the one that likes pumpkin pie for her birthday cake?
Oh, yes. Little Miss Lisa. She wanted pumpkin pie for her birthday, and she got 2. I think she ate 1 whole pie, and she's the most tiniest little thing you ever saw.
I love it. Well, that's the important stuff and the good stuff, and so are you. It's great to have you both back on the podcast, and I thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Actually, you'll be back with me October 2nd. We will do a pop-up podcast after the vice presidential debate. Thank you both. Go have a good afternoon. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.